Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. At this point, I would like to introduce our guest speaker. José Galvez was born in Tucson, Arizona. For over 40 years, he has documented with black and white photographs the Latino life and culture in the United States. He has worked as a photographer for over 20 years in the Los Angeles Times. He has also served as a senior editor for the contributors of, and he has served as a senior editor and contributor to Americanos, which is a multimedia exhibition basically documenting Latino life in the United States, led by Edward James Olmos. His first book, Batos, in collaboration with Luis Alberto Urrera, was honored by the American Library Association. His photographs have been exhibited in countless museums and galleries here and abroad, including the Smithsonian Institute. In 2005, the National Association of Latino Arts and Culture, through the support of Ford Foundation, J.P. Morgan Chase, awarded him and his wife Annie partial funding to create a photography and oral history project called Land of Opportunity, which basically was detailed was a documentary about Latino entrepreneurs in North Carolina. In 2010, Patriotismo, which is a collection that Jose created of photographs taken after 9/11, was installed in the new La Cruces Federal Courthouse located in New Mexico. So these are just some of the information about our guest speaker today. So without further delay, please join me in introducing and in welcoming José Galvez.
All right. You know, we're going through a really interesting time in this country of ours right now, especially if you're Latino, and even if you're not Latino, you would find it to be quite entertaining. I'm hearing expressions I've never heard before in my life. Anchor babies, self-deport, build a wall, make them pay for it, allow the good ones. I mean, where are we? Some of you might remember back in the 1980s and into the 90s how it was being billed as a decade of the Hispanic. Fast forward a couple of decades and you will find yourselves in the true decade of the Hispanic. The U.S. Census counted 14.6 million Hispanics in the 1980 census. The 2000 census had the number at 35.3 million, and it is estimated that the 2011 figure at 52 million people. Now think about it. Are 11 million of those 52 million going to self-deport themselves? Or better yet, are the military folks going to round them up and drive them across the border? I don't think so. And if so, what are they going to do about the other nationalities? The Chinese kitchen workers, the engineers from India, the barista from England, and the children that they might have had here while staying under the radar after their student or travel visa expired. My wife Anna and I were talking about anchor babies just the other day. At one time or another, we were all anchor babies. I mean, I think the first Pilgrim and Virginia Dare was the first. I think Virginia Dare in North Carolina was the true first anchor baby. Go back a couple of generations, if you are an Italian, German, Japanese, or Jewish, and you will find the firstborn, whether it was your great aunt or grandfather, that we are all a country of immigrants, except of course for the truly Native Americans. And don't get me started about the good ones. I meet them all the time, and I'll be talking about some of them this afternoon. But even the bad ones have a lot of good in them. A lot of them do get pulled over for a busted taillight, or maybe they had one too many beers. but they're doing the work that seems others don't want to do or it's too hard. At the meat packers, in the fields, or caring for the children. And last time I checked, all the walls that were being built by Latinos. Go ahead. Let me get this thing starts up properly. This is Jorge Ledesma. He lives in West Jefferson. Can we bring the lights down, please? In West, no, a little bit lighter on, down. There. Oh, no, down on that. I'll try it. Nope. Okay. He is a Christmas tree farmer. Jorge came to the United States as a teenager back in the 1980s. He and his brother crossed into Texas at a time when there was no cell phones. Their mother spent many a fearful week wondering if they were even still alive. Jorge worked the fields in Texas and then Florida and later became an American citizen. He headed to North Carolina to work the Christmas trees and became such an asset to his boss that he is now one of his most valuable employees. When I first moved to the South, now almost 11 years ago, I didn't know that they grew Christmas trees in the South. I thought all the Christmas trees that we get in our living rooms came from Washington State or Oregon or Montana. Every September, Jorge's phone begins to ring. Jorge manages the migrant workers who come to cut and package the trees for all those tree lots you see around Christmas time. Now, Jorge is also his own boss. He has invested in his own lots of trees. He hopes one day to have one of his trees in the White House. Now that is something, people always think of the Christmas tree out in the front of the White House, but there's other trees for the official residence, the Oval Office. So it's quite an honor to have your tree picked for the White House. Now Jorge has 3 children. He sees his children as both Mexican and American. They travel to Mexico in late December and January every year when his work takes a break. The children know Mexico, but they are much more American than he is. Jorge doesn't want his children to farm. He wants his kids to go to school and have careers. He has had a good life working in the fields, but it's a hard life, and he wants something more for them. Jorge Ledesma is just one of the many inspiring people I have photographed in the last 10 or 11 years. My name is José Galvez, and for more than 40 years I have been photographing Latino life in the United States. I am Mexican American. I have a Mexican descent. I was born in the United States. Several people already today have asked me, well, where are you from? And I said, well, I'm from Tucson, Arizona. But where are your family from? I said, well, we were always there, except the border sort of came and changed directions. And as you look at these photographs, I want you to remember, that was not me between my grandmothers. They are the representation of my wider family. I grew up in the Mexican barrios of Tucson. Before I went to school, I heard and spoke mostly Spanish. My barrio, Barrio Hollywood, was nearly 100% Mexican American. We lived in a small 2-room adobe casita with my grandparents. We all slept in one bedroom. Mis abuelos, my grandparents, they slept underneath the window. And during the summertime, that was the coolest part of the house. My parents had their bed on one side of the room, and we boys all slept on one bed on the other side. There was 3 of us, and we were rather small, but it was a comfortable fit. The other room was the kitchen, and if you ever wanted to find my Nana, this is where you would find her. My father, he wasn't around much. He was a working man. He worked on the railroads. For a while, he was a lumberjack in the Pacific Northwest. He was also a farm worker. Once he took me and my brother Bobby out to the fields near Tucson to pick cotton. I don't remember how much we got paid, probably not very much, but it was one of the few times that we got to spend the whole day with him. And when he wasn't around, and that was often, my mother had her hands full with the 4 of us, and her hands weren't strong. She had arthritis and epilepsy all her life and didn't work outside the home. We moved when I was around 10 to an apartment a few blocks from downtown Tucson. This is that apartment. This is my mother, Lupe, and my sister, Sylvia, at her 15th, not quinceanera, but her marriage, a teenage bride and mother at age 15. We weren't moving too far from my old barrio, probably no more than a couple of miles, but it would be a move that would totally change the person that I would become. My new neighborhood was called Barrio Viejo. There were more stores in the neighborhood. In the early mornings, you can smell the bread, the tortillas, and the conchas being baked in the ovens of the Mexican Panderia, Mexican bakery, nearby. Downtown, which was only a few blocks away, became my new playground. It was filled with all kinds of excitement. I loved going to the downtown library where I devoured books on scientists, inventors, composers. I would spend hours in the music room listening to all kinds of music, jazz, classical, folk music. But my main activity after school was hustling. And I mean hustling like in a good sort of sense. My neighbor, Charlie Soto, had gotten me started selling newspapers after school on the downtown sidewalks. On weekends, I sold tamales out of a bucket, and I made a small fortune on Sundays selling papers outside of the church, Catholic church. If you go to the left of this photograph, a couple of blocks would have been that duplex that you saw my mother and sister standing in front of. And you can see how close we were to downtown Tucson. I ran around retrieving empty soda and beer bottles for their deposits. I collected clean boxes for the Mexican bakery. For every box that I would take to the Mexican Panderia, he would give me a cookie. I scoured the dump for torn comics that I would read and then sell to my friends for a dime. I was into recycling before it was fashionable to call it recycling. I look at these little boys and I say, wow, I hope that they turn out to be successful entrepreneurs like myself. I always had money in my pocket. But most of all, I shined. Shoes, that is. And I'm guessing that none of you have ever seen a shoe shine box. Have any of you ever seen a shoe shine box? There's a few who've seen shoe shine box. Most often than not, you probably see the man at the airport shining shoes, but the image of having a little boy on the sidewalks shining shoes, you almost never find him anymore unless you go down to Central America or Mexico or some other country like that. Back then, people liked their leather shoes to be really shiny. You could do it yourself, or you could have someone do it for you. My father made me a box. We filled it with a container of soap and a brush. I used that to get the dirt off. Inside that box, I had waxes of various colors like black and brown, cordovan, maybe a little bit of white. I'd get out my supplies. My customer would put his or her foot on the stand, and I would sit to work with my brushes, waxes, and rags. I made about $1 a day doing so. That may not sound like a lot of money to you today, but back then, $1 was a lot of money. You go to movies for a quarter. Cokes cost a dime. Candy bars cost a nickel. I took that shoe shine box all over the place. I went into the bars and restaurants. I chased down men on the sidewalks. Shine, mister? It's only a dime. I was always hoping for was a quarter. I cleaned the shoes for men getting ready for their dates and for the businessmen on their lunchtime breaks. One night, and it came down to one night that changed my whole life, I was hanging out at the service station behind the newspaper building when Buster Durazo, the owner, got a call asking for that little shoe shine boy. There was a reporter in the newsroom who wanted to shine. That's one thing that Buster would have me do. He would have me wash the cars occasionally back there in one of the docks. Well, up until that time, the only part of the newspaper building that I was familiar with was the loading dock where I would pick up my newspapers that I would sell on the streets. I had never once been inside the rest of the building. I grabbed my box, went around to the front, and I entered that building. To find the newsroom, I had to go up a few flights of stairs. At the top, I opened the door to my future. That shoe shine box changed my life. I found a whole new set of mentors, and I found a new place, the newsroom, that would become the center of my life for more than 4 decades. You know, we didn't have the internet back then. Instead, people got most of their news from the papers that I sold. And these were the people who made the newspaper. They gathered up the facts and wrote the stories. They wrote the headlines that I called out to people to buy. Men and women, men in white shirts and ties, women in high heels and dresses, were talking to telephones, asking a barrage of questions. At other desks, editors were scribbling and erasing and typing. In a small room, machines were spitting out reams of paper with news stories from around the world. It hit me right there, standing on that spot, that I wanted to be one of them. Instead of selling a newspaper on the streets, I wanted to be part of making it. Well, after that night, they couldn't get rid of me. Every evening after the downtown businesses closed and the streets grew quiet, I climbed those stairs and entered that newsroom. Sometimes I shined shoes. Sometimes I ran errands. Sometimes I just sat and watched, taking it all in, getting an early journalism education. I was 10 years old. The nights turned into months, then years. Those people there became my mentors, and after my father died when I was 12, they became like parents. I carried the bag of the photographer who worked across the street to the football games. He was getting my first early sort of photography education. I learned how to write. I gathered up those international stories and delivered them to the world desk. Finally, they hired me as a copy boy when I turned 16. Copy boy is sort of the entry-level position in the newspaper work, sort of like an editorial assistant or a messenger or a copy clerk. I had some obstacles, certainly, along the way. My mother didn't like it when I stayed up late doing homework because the lights were costing her money. She was also raised in the Mexican way that taught her that improving yourself was a sign of being ambioso, ambitious. And for Mexicans, the word ambioso is intended as an insult. This meant you're too big for your pants. You're trying too hard. Or you're showing off. Well, you know, I had other obstacles again. One evening I was shining a man's shoes. He was looking me over, studying me up and down. You're just a poor little Mexican boy, aren't you? I don't think he was expecting an answer. I think it was just a comment based on his observation. And what did he see? You know, it had never been pointed out to me before that I was poor. My family seemed no different than other Mexican families around us. We watched TV in the living room on weekends. My mother bought us new clothes to wear at the beginning of each school year. We had food to eat. You know, but that television set was an old black and white set when everybody else was already getting color TVs. Those new clothes were to last us for the whole school year, and you can imagine what they were like after weeks of constant wearing. That food, by the middle of the month, was often government handouts of processed cheese, powdered milk, some canned mystery meat. You know, I cried softly as I finished up his shoes. Yeah, I said to myself, I might be poor, but I'm going to make something of myself. Years later, when I got to high school, I had a meeting with my counselor. When he asked me what I wanted to be, I told him proudly that I wanted to be a journalist. And why wouldn't I? I hung out in that newsroom every night. Those reporters and editors I worked with were pushing me to go on to college. They talked about how I would be working with them someday. Well, to be a journalist, you have to go to college, and that's not really in your future, he said. It takes studying and good English, and you're not really cut out for it. You know what he's not saying? Does anyone know what he's not saying? He's saying, you're Mexican. Don't even think about it. That man, he wasn't right at all, but maybe he didn't quite kill my dreams. Maybe he thought he had my best interest at heart. I don't know. but I'm glad that I didn't listen to him. But in some ways, he unknowingly led me to my destiny. He suggested that since reporting was beyond my ability, I should consider the blue-collar side of the newspaper profession. He suggested I take print shop and learn to run the print press. I would be making the newspaper then, literally thousands of them every day. Well, I did go on to college. I was the first college graduate on both sides of my family. And as my friends at the newspaper predicted, I worked side by side with them after graduation. I became a staff photographer for the newspaper. And I photographed everything: sports, celebrities coming through town, little kids running through the sprinklers. But what I loved photographing the most was mi cultura, mi barrio, and mi gente. This is my cousin Mercedes. This is my Uncle Jerry. The woman that you saw earlier making tortillas, it was my tia Mercy. I photographed everything that was going on. The war in Vietnam. Hippies were calling for peace. You had the women's liberation movement. You also had the black civil rights movement. And across the Southwest, we had the Chicano movement being led by the late Cesar Chavez. We marched and protested for justice in Hispanic neighborhoods that were being torn down, and the farm workers who were being exploited. This is Chavez. I photographed what I knew. You know, one of the ironies of growing up and becoming a fairly successful photographer is that we didn't have a camera when I was growing up. I have only one picture of my grandparents and only a couple pictures of me and my siblings shot at a downtown department store. I have 0 pictures of my mom and dad together. And I find that really sad that I don't have any photographs of the two of them at their wedding or even a group family portrait. So when I got that first camera from a pawn shop, I began to photograph my world around me. I'm waiting for this to catch up here. This is outside of Phoenix. See that little mocoso boy? Mocoso is a Spanish word we use for snotty nose, and meaning when your nose runs, you wipe yourself with it. Well, that's what I looked like probably when I was a kid. That man with a kid on his shoulders, well, maybe that was my dad at some point, and we just don't have any pictures of that. That hard-working woman, maybe one of my tias did that also. This is why I do what I do. I may not know the people in my photographs well, but I see them as family. They are my wider family, a family that I'm proud of, people that I respect, who live lives that I believe are beautiful. I left the Tucson paper and went to work in 1980 for the Los Angeles Times. I covered everything, celebrities, earthquakes. I was there for a good 12, 13 years, but eventually I left and returned to Arizona. I no longer work for a newspaper, but I have never stopped photographing, and I have never stopped photographing anything but everyday Latino life. Now my family and I live in North Carolina nearly 11 years now. North Carolina has had the second biggest increase in Latino population growth in recent years, as all the states here in the South and Eastern region have had. A few months after we moved, this girl is reacting to being named Miss Latina County, Miss Latina Duplin County. A few months after we moved, we're in a country road near Mount Olive, where they grow a lot of cucumbers for pickles. Mount Olive pickles, Mount Olive. When we saw a homemade sign propped in the window of a shed, Decoraciones Yolanda, is read. We made a quick U-turn, pulled into a small lot with trailers, and a woman came out to see what we were up to. The shed was filled with beads and sequins and lace, and a few weeks later, I came back to photograph as a girl was taught how to embellish her quinceanera dress. This is that girl, Kimlin Salinas. She's also in one of the pictures in the exhibit out there. I was really surprised by one thing that She was Baptist. And mostly when you hear about quinceañeras, does everybody know what a quinceañera is? I know there was a couple who stopped me. I was like, what's a quinceañera? It's a girl's 15th birthday party. And it's not, but it's not really a party. It's like a religious celebration of her leaving her girlish things behind and becoming a young woman. And we met many Latinos who started their own businesses. There's Gustavo Rudia, who came as a 19-year-old. He was frustrated being exploited because he didn't speak Spanish. He was determined to change this. One day at a swap meet, he saw a man selling used furniture. This man didn't speak Spanish, but most of his customers were Latino. Gustavo offered his bilingual skills and began a career selling furniture. Now he owns 2 furniture stores. He's an employer and a member of the Chamber of Commerce. Maria Hernandez would get compliments for her food from her husband's co-workers. She opened a taqueria in Lexington, Kentucky. She now dreams of having a bigger place where she can serve her famous tres leches cake. Pancho Anaya has baking in his blood. His father and grandfather were bakers. He and his kids now run the panaderia, or bakery, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We were just there a week before last. But his panaderia is way different than what his grandfather had. Pancho has Wi-Fi, espresso coffee, and an indoor gazebo for special events. And now his son is marketing their own tequila brand. Wow, they're really moving up. They're on Facebook and everything else, all the modern, contemporary social media. This is Patricia Castillo, who makes paletas, Mexican popsicles. She creates the mixes and then pours them into molds in large freezing vats. She dreams one day of having her paletas not just in the Latino tiendas, but also in the grocery stores and the convenience markets. Ana Aguila and her father sing the old Mexican songs at taquerias and special events. These are songs my nana taught me to love. Ana wants to become a teacher and return to teach children in Mexico someday. Here's a picture of kids practicing at our favorite park for a quinceañera. The boys and girls have to work hard to perfect the dances. Who you don't see to the right of the photograph is 17-year-old Patricia Miranda. She had big dreams. She wants to open up her own dance studio someday, and I think that she'll succeed. These are the Solozano brothers, who work construction but own a Western clothing store in Durham. While they go off to build roads, their wives run the store, and their children have grown up under the racks. I'm sure that you've heard similar stories in your own families, or that you know of people in these kind of situations. Maybe your parents or friends of your college classmates have a small business, or maybe one of their fathers works as a roofer. Maybe yourself work in the evenings at McDonald's, or maybe some of your Latino friends work in the fields in the summertime. Maybe you have big dreams. I hope that you do, and I hope that you can draw inspiration from all these people who are chasing their dreams. I know I look really old to you, but maybe we're not that different. I'm Mexican, but I'm also American. I speak English and Spanish. I worked in the white-collar world, but as a child, I handed over most of my money to my mother to help feed the family. I'm middle class now, but I come from poverty. My job is to do 2 things. I photograph to show Latinos themselves and to say that you are living beautiful lives. I do this with respect and with love and with a desire to safeguard the dignity of the people who trust me with their images. As Luis Urea said in his poem in my book, Vatos, I want to say with these photographs, you are not forgotten. You are not ignored. I see you, and I admire you and respect you. Your hard, back-breaking work your drive to succeed, your love for family. I want you to walk away from here empowered. You are changing this place, and you are being changed by it. Cultural, language, food, music, faith, sports. You are giving and taking. We're passing things back and forth, and we are better for the diversity of it. My second job is to take the work to non-Latino audiences like yourselves here today. My hope is that you non-Hispanic viewers will see a picture that you like, that you will be moved to understanding, that the image will somehow touch you in a way that words can't and that rhetoric can't. And so I say to you now, keep it up. Whatever the challenges, and I'm sure that there are many, keep it up. You are working hard here in college. Keep it up. Even if the adults, especially those in politics, seem angry or misguided, you all are the future. And for you educators, believe that the good that you do today radiates out. It may radiate in the hopeful step of a new college graduate. It may radiate when someone you've helped reaches out because you reached out to them. It may very well radiate in a time and place that you'll never know about among people you'll never see again. Don't lose faith. Don't give in when there's an obstacle. Keep dreaming and keep at it. Keep it up. I'd like to end with the words of St. Francis de Sales. Be who you are and be that well. And while you're at it, shine. Thank you for listening to my story.